This is the ninth edition of the Walloon Writers Review, and I'm going to read my story, Casting for Ghosts. At least once every season, I try casting for ghosts. I've heard stories, rumors of this place. Old-timers throw the name out in barside conversation, reminiscing about days past when the fishing was good in every spring-fed backwater. A 4-pound, 20-inch brook trout in a pond this size? Brookies that size are a rarity anywhere. A few lucky folks have had the fortune to catch one of their coaster cousins while trolling on Superior. Anyone who would have caught a wild fish that size in a stream or beaver pond around here is probably no longer alive to talk about it. Now, fish that size only are caught when the hatchery plants its retired broodstock. Their fins and tails worn and frayed from years in a concrete raceway. My first big brook trout was one of these, caught in an old flooded iron mine, periodically stocked with fish, though I didn't realize it until years later. It would have been half an inch longer, too, if its tail was entirely intact. But old Lewis Pond has been forgotten, discarded. Kids who fished here with their grandparents grew up, moved south, and traded in trout worms and rubber boots for diesel trucks and bass boats. The last of the old-timers who fished it have been gone for more than 20 years, and it's around that time the DNR gave up on it and began devoting their efforts to other, more productive waters. Stocking trout in remote lakes is expensive, both in terms of money and labor. Few are the people who would voluntarily hike in to fish such a marginal water, to quote the email reply from the local fisheries biologist. The water started to get too warm. Mining operations and a golf course lowered the local water table. The inlet is far too clogged with sediment to realistically support any spawning activity. The eggs would suffocate in the sand. The pond just doesn't have nearly enough groundwater feeding it to keep temperatures down and oxygen up. The trout, he wrote, have probably long died off without any descendants to replace them. Eaten by otters or herons, probably overrun with stunted bullheads, creek chubs, and suckers by now. Maybe a few bluegill if I was lucky. Frog water, another dismissive descriptor. After hours scouring satellite imagery of this place on Google Earth over the past couple months, I still wasn't sure what I'd find. The lack of information is, admittedly, part of what drew me in. As incredible a feat of human innovation the internet is, few places on the planet remain shrouded in mystery. But despite being within a 15-minute drive from town, places like this still are a type of wilderness to most, if only because little to no information exists on the internet. It's too small to be listed in any of the spiral-bound map books found in local sporting goods departments. Not even an estimate of depth. Asking around isn't much use. Folks who fish for brook trout are reclusive and reluctant to share good intel, often for good reason, as productive trout waters are becoming a rarity. No photos of the place either, aside from satellite imagery. I'd probably have better luck going door to door up 3rd Street and asking if the old family photo album had any shots of Grandpa and his fishing pals at the pond. I parked the truck in an inconspicuous spot just off the main road. There's still about half a mile walk down a well-worn hiking path that passes along the ridge above the pond. Despite being dressed in chest waders and an overstuffed vest, I try not to draw attention to myself. There are still a couple hours until it gets truly dark, but I pack a headlamp anyway. I feel ridiculous having brought a fly rod in the truck, more so as I unpackage a new tapered leader and tie on a little blue-winged olive. I pause and consider whether to carry a net, as it conveys unrealistic, laughable hopes and expectations. But I sigh, remind myself no one is around to see, clip the net to my vest, and set off down the trail. Early summer evenings in this part of the country are simply stunning. The sun is still fairly high above the tree line, even though it's getting close to 9. It's still nearly 70 degrees out, too, and humid. The spring peepers are out in full force, and I know they'll only get louder as I approach the pond and the sun goes down. The mosquitoes don't bother me much anymore. When I was a kid, I couldn't stand them. My mom still plans her summer activities based on how buggy it is outside. I even find the smell of bug spray pleasant. For me, the unmistakable scent of summer is a blend of pine, mowed grass, fern, wood smoke, and DEET. The neuropsychology of the senses is fascinating. No photo or video, no virtual reality experience could quite trigger the same memory response as this combination of sights, sounds, and scents. After getting caught up in thought for a while, I'm suddenly standing atop the ridge above the pond. The hemlock stands are too thick to glimpse the water from here. I find something resembling a deer trail. Then ducking beneath boughs and breaking through dead branches, I follow it down and around to a marshy part of the shoreline. From where I'm standing, ankle deep in the sulphurous muck along the shore, the pond looks like dozens of others I've visited over the years. The whole thing can't be more than an acre or 2. Such an arbitrary measurement. How far do I need to cast to actually land my fly in the water and not on a lily pad? Tag alders line most of this shore, tall pines and steep banks on the other side. Water lilies are blooming in the shallows, giving way to a relatively small area of open water in the middle. Water striders skid across the surface. Some tiny flying insects I don't recognize are flying in a complex formation, just a couple feet above the water. There's a mallard and her babies near the shallow inlet at the far end of the pond, quietly diving into the mud to feed. The whole scene is familiar, but a bit unsettling, like photos of abandoned amusement parks or malls, or an open casket funeral for a distant relative. I've brought my rod and a couple flies, not because I plan to catch anything, but out of respect for the dead. I stand and watch the pond for what feels like an hour, although it's probably only 5 minutes. The water is very clear, only appearing dark on satellite maps because of the muck below. I dip my hand in and it's colder than expected. And so, like a funny memory shared during a eulogy to lighten the spirit, I strip out some line and make a little roll cast just beyond the edge of the lilies. The tiny fly floats for a while. I leave it out there as I make my way a little further down the shoreline, one hand grasping the tag alders in case the muck gets too deep. I find a break in the thick brush where I can make a short back cast. Another couple casts out, a bit further each time. I leave the fly still for a while, then try gently twitching it. Surely something would take this fly, even if it was a creek chub. Ironically, I once fished a stretch of the East Escanaba with dry flies and only caught chubs, then switched to a spinning rod and worms and caught brook trout. Not that I expected anything, but I have a hard time reeling in and calling it quits on the little dry fly. It's getting darker. The sun has dipped below the trees now. I only brought a couple flies in my pocket, so I snip off the blue-winged olive and clumsily tie on a black woolly bugger that's probably big enough to hook one of the fall kings down on the Manastique. Silly, I tell myself. Here are some final words of comfort as the casket is lowered into the earth. I make a long cast out into what I'm assuming is the deepest part of the pond, letting the fly sink while I count 20 before I start to strip line in short bursts. I'm only half paying attention, and it takes me a minute to realize what's happening. All of a sudden, and all at once, there's no room for confusion. My line is moving out into deeper water, and a fish is pulling drag. It doesn't feel like a brook trout, or really any sort of inland trout. I've been fortunate to catch enough brooks, browns, and rainbows to know what they feel like on the other end of a line. This feels more like the fat Lakers I've reeled in fishing on my buddy's salmon boat. It's heavy, Doesn't want to come up to the surface. Just a steady, dogged pull deeper and deeper. My excitement fades a little, though, as something doesn't feel quite right. There's no way this is a trout. I recall the time up in Seney when my buddy, standing on a fallen tree laying across the stream, thought he hooked into a real dandy only to pull in a big old white sucker. But why and how would a sucker take a wet fly unless it was right on the bottom? This rod is my great-grandfather's, a little wooden number labeled O Fish L, Point Sporting Goods, 1955. Only really suited for the little logjam brookies up on the Yellow Dog that rarely grow over 9 or 10 inches. It's bent over in a hoop like those iconic silhouettes of fly fishermen landing their catch that adorn the covers of outdoor magazines. The leader, tapered down to 2 pounds at the end of its 9 feet, is too light for this fish. Is it snagged in the weeds? There's movement again. I let the fish pull out more drag, but my reel is almost out of line. I reel in a bit and gently try to pump the rod to move the fish up. It moves up closer to the surface. It feels lighter now. The fish is swimming toward me. It approaches the surface and I see a quick flash of movement. The times I've been deer hunting, sitting in a dark blind as the light struggles to breach the horizon, it's deceptively easy to mistake some maple twigs for antlers. If only I could will them to be so. At that moment, with the last of the evening light fading around the pond and the chorus of peepers almost deafening, I knew exactly what I was seeing. The fish turned upright, and for a small fraction of a second revealed the unmistakable yellow spots and red speckles against a dark, almost black body. Some sucker. Never trust a fisherman to give you an accurate estimate of length without photographic evidence, but this fish was well over a foot, probably near 1.5 feet. My heart rate speeds up again. I slowly reach around with my left hand to grab the net. The fish dives and starts to run again. Foolishly, I try to stop it in its tracks and turn it around. Suddenly, all goes weightless. The line goes slack. Shit. I don't remember much of the hike back out of there. My heart is racing. I think about the times I've nearly collided with a deer out on a dark winter road. The adrenaline hit is delayed and only comes once the scare is over. There's really no one around to appreciate or believe what just happened. None of my fishing friends care much for trout, especially when it involves any kind of hiking. And when I can coerce them into coming along, they prefer a worm and bobber. Heck, that's how my brother caught that 15-incher out of Midway Pond last spring, while I got skunked with flies. For now, just a ghost story. It's now quite dark, and I'm second-guessing as I climb back into the truck. Memory is fickle, unreliable. The more a memory is replayed, the more muddled it becomes. Honest eyewitness testimony is known to be inaccurate over half the time. Did I really see the spots? Yes. Definitely yellow spots. Maybe it was a little pike that somehow migrated way upstream from Partridge Lake. Yes, that's probably what it was. That does make more sense, I say out loud, trying to explain away what I know I really saw. I pull into the driveway, peel off my waders on the porch, and walk in the door, exhausted and smelling strongly of hemlock and bug dope. My wife is on the couch with a book. The kids are asleep. Out of obligation, she asks if I caught anything. Almost, I mumble, out of breath. Almost.